Hey guys, Sam from Manfa Makes. Happy Saturday! It is, of course, time for our Saturday story time. Welcome back to all my returners and hi to any newbies. This is the weekend segment here over at Manfa Makes, where on a Saturday and a Sunday I read you some stories from this book here, which is Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. And there is a whole playlist on my channel should you wish to listen to the others. And I also read The Wizard of Oz as well, so that's in the playlist, in a separate playlist also. So if you have seen some of my videos this week, you will know that I've been a bit poorly with heat stroke. I am still not 100%. Clearly the heat is not my friend, but it's okay. I will recover and I am feeling a lot better than I did. So we are making progress. Yeah, heat waves in the UK, we're just not used to it, folks. Anyway, as always, I do give a little disclaimer that these stories were written a long time ago. They are the words of the authors only. I am literally reading you the words off the page, and I am not saying that I condone or support any themes or hidden messages contained within these stories. I am literally just reading to you guys. Also, I have to have the window open as in the UK we do not have air conditioning and there are people outside enjoying the sunshine, so you may hear noises of people in their gardens or down in the village. So I do apologise for any background noise. But let's jump into it because I think we will have time for 3 of the shorter stories today. And the first one is story 61 and it's called The Little Peasant. There was a certain village where no one lived but really rich peasants and just one poor one, whom they called the Little Peasant. He had not even so much as a cow and still less money to buy one, and yet he and his wife did so wish to have one. One day he said to her, "Say, I have a good thought. There is our friend the carpenter. He shall make us a wooden calf and paint it brown so that it looks like any other, and in time it will certainly get big and be a cow." The woman also liked the idea, and their friend the carpenter cut and planed the calf and painted it as it ought to be, and made it with its head hanging down as if it were eating. Next morning, when the cows were being driven out, the little peasant called the cowherd and said, "Look, I have a little calf there, but it is still small and has to still be carried." The cowherd said, "All right," and took it in his arms and carried it to the pasture and set it among the grass. The little calf always remained standing and seemed to be eating all the time, and the cowherd said, "It will soon be able to run alone, just look how it eats already." At night, when he was going to drive the herd home again, he said to the calf, "If you can stand there and eat your fill, you can also go on your 4 legs. I don't care to drag you home again in my arms." But the little peasant stood at his door and waited for his little calf, and when the cowherd drove the cows through the village and the calf was missing, he inquired where it was. The cowherd answered, "It is still standing out there eating. It would not stop and come with us." But the little peasant said, "Oh, but I must have my beast back again." Then they went back to the meadow together, but someone had stolen the calf and it was gone. The cowherd said, "It must have run away." The peasant, however, said, "Don't tell me that," and brought the cowherd before the mayor, who for his carelessness condemned him to give the peasant a cow for the calf which had run away. And now the little peasant and his wife had the cow for which they had so long wished, and they were heartily glad, but they had no food for it and could give it nothing to eat, so it soon had to be killed. They salted the flesh, and the peasant went into the town and wanted to sell the skin there, so that he might buy a new calf with the proceeds. On the way he passed by a mill, and there sat a raven with broken wings, and out of pity he took him and wrapped him in the skin. As, however, the weather grew so bad and there was a storm of rain and wind, he could go no further and turned back to the mill and begged for shelter. The miller's wife was alone in the house and said to the peasant, "Lay yourself on the straw there," and gave him a slice of bread with cheese on it. The peasant ate it and lay down with his skin beside him, and the woman thought, "He is tired and has gone to sleep." In the meantime came the parson. The miller's wife received him well and said, "My husband is out, so we will have a feast." The peasant listened, and when he heard about feasting, he was vexed that he had been forced to make do with a slice of bread with cheese on it. Then the woman served up 4 different things: roast meat, salad, cakes, and wine. Just as they were about to sit down and eat, there was a knocking outside. The woman said, "Oh heavens, it is my husband." She quickly hid the roast meat inside the tiled stove, the wine under the pillow, the salad on the bed, the cakes under it, and the parcel in the cupboard in the entrance. Then she opened the door for her husband and said, "Thank heaven you are back again. There is such a storm. It looks as if the world were coming to an end." The miller saw the peasant lying on the straw and asked, "What is that fellow doing there?" "Ah," said the wife, "the poor knave came in the storm and rain and begged for shelter, so I gave him a bit of bread and cheese and showed him where the straw was." The man said, "I have no objection, but be quick and get me something to eat." The woman said, "But I have nothing but bread and cheese." "I am contented with anything," replied the husband. "So far as I am concerned, bread and cheese will do," and looked at the peasant and said, "Come and eat some more with me." The peasant did not require to be invited twice, but got up and ate. After this, the miller saw the skin in which the raven was wrapped lying on the ground, and asked, "What have you there?" The peasant answered, "I have a soothsayer inside it." "Can he foretell anything to me?" said the miller. "Why not?" answered the peasant, "but he only says 4 things, and the 5th he keeps to himself." The miller was curious and said, "Let him foretell something for once." Then the peasant pinched the raven's head so that he croaked and made a noise like "Krr, krr." The miller said, "What did he say?" The peasant answered, "In the first place, he says there is some wine hidden under the pillow." "Bless me," cried the miller, and went there and found the wine. "Now go on," said he. The peasant made the raven croak again and said, "In the second place, he says that there is some roast meat in the tiled stove." "Upon my word," cried the miller, and went there and found the roast meat. The peasant made the raven prophesy still more, and said, "Thirdly, he says that there is some salad on the bed." "That would be a fine thing," cried the miller, and went there and found the salad. At last the peasant pinched the raven once more till he croaked, and said, "Fourthly, he says that there are some cakes under the bed." "That would be a fine thing," cried the miller, and looked there and found the cakes. And now the two sat down to the table together, but the miller's wife was frightened to death and went to bed and took all the keys with her. The miller would have much liked to know the 5th, but the little peasant said, "First we will quickly eat the 4 things, for the 5th is something bad." So they ate, and after they bargained how much the miller was to give for the 5th prophecy, until they agreed on 300 talkers. Then the peasant once more pinched the raven's head till he croaked loudly. The miller asked, "What did he say?" The peasant replied, "He says that the devil is hiding there in the cupboard in the entrance." The miller said, "The devil must go out and open the door." Then the woman was forced to give up the keys, and the peasant unlocked the cupboard. The parson ran out as fast as he could, and the miller said, "It was true, I saw the black rascal with my own eyes." The peasant made off next morning by daybreak with the 300 talkers. At home the small peasant gradually launched out. He built a beautiful house, and the peasant said, "The small peasant has certainly been to the place where golden snow falls, and people carry the gold home in shovels." Then the small peasant was brought before the mayor and bidden to say from where his wealth came. He answered, "I sold my cow's skin in the town for 300 talkers." When the peasants heard that, they too wished to enjoy this great profit, and ran home, killed all their cows, and stripped off their skins in order to sell them in the town to the greatest advantage. The mayor, however, said, "But my servant must go first." When she came to the merchant in the town, he did not give her more than 2 talkers for a skin, and when the others came, he did not give them so much, and said, "What can I do with all these skins?" Then the peasants were vexed that the small peasant should have thus deceived them, wanting to take vengeance on him, and accused him of this treachery before the mayor. The innocent little peasant was unanimously sentenced to death, and was to be rolled into the water in a barrel pierced full of holes. He was led forth, and a priest was brought who was to say a mass for his soul. The others were all obliged to retire to a distance, and when the peasant looked at the priest, he recognized the man who had been with the miller's wife. He said to him, "I set you free from the cupboard, set me free from the barrel." At this same moment up came with a flock of sheep the very shepherd who the peasant knew had long been wishing to be mayor. So he cried with all his might, "No, I will not do it. If the whole world insists on it, I will not do it." The shepherd, hearing that, came up to him and asked, "What are you about? What is it that you will not do?" The peasant said, "They want to make me mayor, but if I will put myself in the barrel, but I will not do it." The shepherd said, "If nothing more than that is needed in order to be mayor, I would get into the barrel at once." The peasant said, "If you will get in, you will be mayor." The shepherd was willing and got in, and the peasant shut the top down on him. Then he took the shepherd's flock for himself and drove it away. The parson went to the crowd and declared that the mass had been said. Then they came and rolled the barrel towards the water. When the barrel began to roll, the shepherd cried, "I am quite willing to be mayor." They believed that it was the peasant who was saying this, and answered, "That is what we intend, but first you shall go down below and look about you a little." And they rolled the barrel down into the water. After that the peasants went home, and as they were entering the village, the small peasant also came quietly in, driving a flock of sheep and looking quite contented. Then the peasants were astonished and said, "Peasant, from where do you come? Have you come out of the water?" "Yes, truly," replied the peasant. "I sank deep, deep down until at last I got to the bottom. I pushed the bottom out of the barrel and crept out, and there were pretty meadows on which a number of lambs were feeding, and from there I brought this flock away with me." Said the peasants, "Are there any more there?" "Oh, yes," said he, "more than I could do anything with." Then the peasants made up their minds that they too would fetch some sheep for themselves, a flock apiece. But the mayor said, "I come first." So they went to the water together, and just then there were some of the small fleecy clouds in the blue sky, which are called little lambs, and they were reflected in the water. And the peasants cried, "We already see the sheep down below." The mayor pressed forward and said, "I will go down first and look about me, and if things look promising I'll call you." So he jumped in. Splash went the water. He made a sound as if he were calling them, and the whole crowd plunged in after him. Then the entire village was dead, and the small peasant, as sole heir, became a rich man. Okay, story 2, which is story 62, and it's called The Queen Bee. Two kings' sons once went out in search of adventures and fell into a wild, disorderly way of living, so that they never came home again. The youngest, who was called Simpleton, set out to seek his brothers, but when at length he found them, they mocked him for thinking that he could get through the world with his simplicity, when they both could not make their way, and yet were so much cleverer. They all three travelled away together and came to an ant-hill. The two eldest wanted to destroy it, to see the little ants creeping about in their terror and carrying their eggs away, but Simpleton said, "Leave the creatures in peace, I will not allow you to disturb them." Then they went onwards and came to a lake, on which a great number of ducks were swimming. The two brothers wanted to catch a couple and roast them, but Simpleton would not permit it, and said, "Leave the creatures in peace, I will not allow you to kill them." At length they came to a bee's nest, in which there was so much honey that it ran out of the trunk of the tree where it was. The two wanted to make a fire beneath the tree and suffocate the bees in order to take away the honey, but Simpleton again stopped them and said, "Leave the creatures in peace, I will not allow you to burn them." At length the three brothers arrived at a castle where stone horses were standing in the stables, and no human being was to be seen, and they went through all the halls until quite at the end they came to a door in which were 3 locks. In the middle of the door, however, there was a little pane through which they could see into the room. There they saw a little grey man who was sitting at a table. They called him once, twice, but he did not hear. At last they called him for the 3rd time, when he got up, opened the locks, and came out. He said nothing, however, but conducted them to a handsomely spread table, and when they had eaten and drunk, he took each of them to a bedroom. Next morning the little grey man came to the eldest, beckoned to him, and conducted him to a stone table, on which were inscribed 3 tasks, that when performed could deliver the castle from enchantment. The first was that in the forest beneath the moss lay the princess's pearls, 1,000 in number, which must be picked up, and if by sunset one single pearl was wanting, he who had looked for them would be turned into stone. The eldest went there and sought the whole day, but when it came to an end he had only found 100, and what was written on the table came to pass, and he was changed into stone. Next day the second brother undertook the adventure. It did not, however, fare much better with him than with the eldest. He did not find more than 200 pearls, and was changed to stone. At last the turn came to Simpleton also, who sought in the moss. It was, however, so hard to find the pearls, and he got on so slowly, that he seated himself on a stone and wept. And while he was thus sitting, the king of the ants, whose life he had once saved, came with 5,000 ants, and before long the little creatures had got all the pearls together and laid them in a heap. The second task, however, was to fetch out of the lake the key of the king's daughter's bedchamber. When Simpleton came to the lake, the ducks which he had saved swam up to him, dived down, and brought the key out of the water. But the third task was the most difficult. From amongst the 3 sleeping daughters of the king, he was to choose the youngest and dearest. They, however, resembled each other exactly, and were only to be distinguished by their having eaten different sweetmeats before they fell asleep, the eldest a bit of sugar, the second a little syrup, and the youngest a spoonful of honey. Then the queen of the bees, which Simpleton had protected from the fire, came and tasted the lips of all 3, and at last she remained sitting on the mouth which had eaten honey, and thus the king's son recognised the right princess. Then the enchantment was at an end, everything was released from sleep, and those who had been turned to stone received once more their natural forms. Simpleton married the youngest and sweetest princess, and after her father's death became king, and his 2 brothers received the 2 other sisters. And lastly, it is story 3, story 63, which is called The 3 Feathers. There was once upon a time a king who had 3 sons, of whom 2 were clever and wise, but the third did not speak much, and was simple, and was called the Simpleton. When the king had become old and weak, and was thinking of his end, he did not know which of his sons should inherit the kingdom after him. Then he said to them, "Go forth, and he who brings me the most beautiful carpet shall be king after my death." And that there should be no dispute amongst them, he took them outside his castle, blew 3 feathers in the air, and said, "You shall go as they fly." 1 feather flew to the east, the other to the west, but the third flew straight up and did not fly far, but soon fell to the ground. And now 1 brother went to the right, and the other to the left, and they mocked Simpleton, who was forced to stay where the third feather had fallen. He sat down and was sad. Then all at once he saw that there was a trapdoor close by the feather. He raised it up, found some steps, and went down them, and then he came to another door, knocked at it, and heard somebody inside calling, "Little green maiden small, hopping here and there, hop to the door and quickly see who is there." The door opened, and he saw a great fat toad sitting, and round about her a crowd of little toads. The fat toad asked what he wanted. He answered, "I should like to have the prettiest and finest carpet in the world." Then she called a young one and said, "Little green maiden small, hopping here and there, hop quickly and bring me the great box here." The young toad brought the box, and the fat toad opened it and gave Simpleton a carpet out of it, so beautiful and so fine that on the earth above none could have been woven like it. Then he thanked her and ascended again. The 2 others had, however, looked on their youngest brother as so stupid that they believed he would find and bring nothing at all. "Why should we give ourselves a great deal of trouble to search?" said they, and they got some coarse handkerchiefs from the first shepherds' wives whom they met, and carried them home to the king. At the same time, Simpleton also came back and brought his beautiful carpet, and when the king saw it he was astonished and said, "If justice be done, the kingdom belongs to the youngest." But the 2 others let their father have no peace, and said that it was impossible that Simpleton, who lacked understanding in everything, should be king, and entreated him to make a new agreement with them. Then the father said, "He who brings me the most beautiful ring shall inherit the kingdom," and led the 3 brothers out and blew into the air 3 feathers, which they were to follow. Those of the 2 eldest again went east and west, and Simpleton's feather flew straight up and fell down near the door into the earth. Then he went down again to the fat toad and told her that he wanted the most beautiful ring. She at once ordered her great box to be brought, and gave him a ring out of it, which sparkled with jewels and was so beautiful that no goldsmith on earth would have been able to make it. The 2 eldest laughed at Simpleton for going to seek a golden ring. They gave themselves no trouble, but knocked the nails out of an old ring from the harness of a carriage horse, and took it to the king. But when Simpleton produced his golden ring, the father again said, "The kingdom belongs to him." The 2 eldest did not cease from tormenting the king until he made a 3rd condition, and declared that the one who brought the most beautiful woman home should have the kingdom. He again blew the 3 feathers into the air, and they flew as before. Then Simpleton, without more ado, went down to the fat toad and said, "I am to take home the most beautiful woman." "Oh," answered the toad, "the most beautiful woman. She is not at hand at the moment, but still you shall have her." She gave him a yellow turnip which had been hollowed out, to which 6 mice were harnessed. Then Simpleton said quite mournfully, "What am I to do with that?" The toad answered, "Just put one of my little toads into it." Then he seized one at random out of the circle and put her into the yellow coach, but hardly was she seated inside it than she turned into a wonderfully beautiful maiden, and the turnip into a coach, and the 6 mice into horses. So he kissed her and drove off quickly with the horses and took her to the king. His brothers came afterwards. They had given themselves no trouble at all to seek beautiful girls, but had brought with them the first peasant women they chanced to meet. When the king saw them, he said, "After my death the kingdom belongs to my youngest son." But the 2 eldest deafened the king's ears with their clamour. "We cannot consent to Simpleton's being king," and demanded that the one whose wife could leap through a ring which hung in the centre of the hall should have the kingdom. They thought, "The peasant women can do that easily. They are strong enough, but the delicate maiden will jump herself to death." The aged king agreed to this. Then the 2 peasant women jumped and jumped through the ring, but were so stout that they fell, and their coarse arms and legs broke in 2. And then the pretty maiden whom Simpleton had brought with him sprang and sprang through as lightly as a deer, and all opposition had to cease. So he received the crown and has ruled wisely for a length of time. So there we have it, guys. Those are the 3 stories for today. I really do hope you are having a wonderful weekend, and in particular a wonderful Saturday. I have no plans other than to stay out of the sun, to recharge and prepare myself to go to work on Sunday. The temperatures are still going to be very high, so I am not looking forward to working in this extreme heat, but hopefully I will get through it. And then from Monday onwards, fingers crossed, we are hoping to have a break in the weather and the temperatures will go down again. So, as always, guys, stay safe, be kind, look after one another, get some good quality time in with your loved ones, and get some good quality crafting time in. I will definitely see you in the next one or around the YouTube streets. Love you guys. Bye.